background is I worked at Friends of the Earth for a while as a campaigns coordinator. And one of the learnings for me there was to see how, as a system, as Friends of the Earth took on opponents, such as corporate entities, government entities, strangely, Friends of the Earth seemed to become more corporate itself. There was a way in which, as a system, we started reproducing that which we were not so keen on. Another part of my background is I trained as a homeopath, and I got very interested in the notion of minimal intervention. How could change be led and supported, even in big systems, excuse me, through forms of minimal intervention? Often what happens is armies of consultants descend on an organisation. They make a change machine out of the process. The process then cannot respond to what is emergent in the field of the work. It becomes insensitive to the feedback loops. It becomes insensitive to the wider stakeholder situation of that organisation, and the change becomes a deadening process. And it often fails. I mean, the statistics around the proportion of large-scale, complex change endeavours actually succeeding and delivering against the original aims is very small. So 15 years ago I became a consultant, and I've been trying to find a way of working deftly with systems, with leaders, in a way that allows the change, whatever the kind of specific agenda, which can be quite narrow in an often corporate context, but how actually can that change touch the system and touch stakeholders in a way that opens up all sorts of progressive possibilities. And in a sense, allows for a healing movement at some level, maybe many levels, individual, team, organisation, wider system. And in the methodology that we're hoping to offer into this space today, I found something of that genius, a methodology, an approach that can work deftly and can work deeply and can touch the souls of those.
I'm really delighted to be here. It's quite a momentous moment for me to be here in many ways, because I began my working life in the 80s in the organic movement, British Organic Farmers and the Organic Growers Association. And then in the early 90s, I was Public Affairs Director of the Soil Association, and I left to set up a small farm and organic herb business that imported and packaged and sold, and trying to do something more than simply attend to the bottom line. And then I was always interested, as an adopted child, I spent my whole life, one way or another, trying to find my belonging, trying to understand actually what belonging actually meant, which is quite difficult when you feel like you come from nowhere. And that particular part of my journey took me in all sorts of different directions, one of which was to come across, in fact I was sent in a strange way, to one of the very first workshops in this country of this particular methodology that began 30 years ago in Germany, inspired by a priest philosopher who was dissatisfied with the support he could give through his Catholic faith, and came back and trained in Jungian and various other psychotherapeutic approaches, and ended up working in the field of reconciliation between perpetrators and survivors of the Holocaust. And part of his professional life had involved being a missionary in Africa, where he said he learned more from those he was there to help than he felt he'd ever given them. And he learned a lot about field-based energy and the information that's available when we cooperate with the field. So I arrived at this workshop in the UK in '93, I think, and it completely changed my life. And then, just under 10 years later, still running the organic business, my daughter had a terrible accident, which meant I had to stop work for 18 months to rehab her. And when it came, when she was well enough for me to return to work, something had sort of fallen out of the bottom of my alignment with what I was doing. Although we wanted to do something better than the sum of the parts, it somehow lacked meaning. And it was at that moment that I realized that the riding sidecar to my life was this particular methodology. So since then, I've been running workshops mostly in family work to start with. This work began in the field of, you could call it family therapy. It's not really therapy, but it's a way of working with issues within the family that's incredibly effective and very elegant, as Nick was saying. It's very short-term work, it's very precise. But since then, my interest has been, I run the school that teaches this particular methodology in the UK, and my interest has been in expanding the field of the work. And it seems that as we become more conversant and familiar with the energies within the field, which we're going to explore today, it seems as if as we open to it, there's literally no limit to how this way of seeing the world, how this way of dealing with discord can be applied. I mean, it's rather amazing. So we're following the thread as practitioners in a sense of where the work's taking us. And so to come back to today, it is a rather, it's a momentous moment for me, because sitting here now is the point at which my two careers, if you like, they reconverge. And it feels sort of potent and also rather scary. And we're supported in what's going to be, I think, for some of you, quite an edgy session. We're supported by all those who've already spoken in the conference in a very edgy way. So I'm feeling like we're stepping in line with those who've already taken risks in the last 36 hours. And we're going to take a few risks with you now. So I hope that somehow we're going to manage to convey the depth, the potential, and the potency of the work. But it's a big ask in an hour.
So here's what we're hoping to do: illustrate something of the thinking behind this and the methodology itself, and how it can serve this broad agenda of harmony. And we want to offer sort of fragments of thinking and debrief, but also some experience of this methodology. Gaye is the experienced constellator here. I've trained in the methodology some 13 years ago, but I'm far less practiced and experienced than Gaye. And we find that often this methodology can work rather well with somebody who's able and free to step fully into the process of constellating, while the other holds the more sort of supportive role and can frame and support the audience into the process. So I'll be holding that role while Gaye is free to move as the constellator.
What we'd like you to do now is just take a moment or two to turn to somebody who's sitting near you. It might be twos, it might be threes, whatever's easy. But just to take a moment to really see them, just for a second or two, to make contact. And then to say, to tell the other something that's really touched you so far in this conference. and how that aligns with your sort of heart's desire in the wider context of your life. So what have you received that's really moved you? And how is it attended to something that you wish for? And to set you off, I had a wonderful example this morning at breakfast of what I'm trying to encourage you to tap into. And it was a sense or a recognition of the depth of respect and care that the young lot, who were all looking after us so beautifully in the kitchen, had when they handed me my plate of food. And on each occasion that I've arrived with an empty plate, the attention to detail, the finesse with which the food has been placed on my plate has really touched me. And that experience has attended for me to the hope that I have for the future. It's something around, for me, being in the environment of youngsters who are holding intrinsically a sense of respect and a place for the food that we're eating. It fills me with hope, and that hope takes me a little further into the future with confidence. So the future can feel like quite a bleak and scary place, and yet this moment of being touched extended my sense of what was possible in the future. So just turn to each other and take a moment to tap into what's touched you in this conference and where it's taken you in your relationship to the future.
So this is very, very quick. So some of the thinking behind this methodology goes something like this. So it acknowledges that, we live in systems that are part of bigger systems that are part of bigger systems. Holes within holes within holes. And also that each hole is a fractal of the larger whole. So in some sense, each system of which we're a part and the system that we are is somehow very intricately and mysteriously connected to all other systems. The oak and the acorn, and so on and so forth. And from that stems, or one can trace the idea that this interconnectivity that is increasingly being proven by the leading edge of science, at an atomic level, truly does exist. That, in a sense, many senses, you, sir, am I, and I am you, and that impacts us hugely as we come to recognize that. And that realization is in this work, in this methodology, and is demonstrated by it. So it works with that very fundamental and profound understanding. And we talk of the knowing field. So this is something that many indigenous societies have known for a long time. The acacia is sometimes how it's been named, or an etheric sense of the interconnectedness, not only the interconnectedness, but the knowingness that is in that interconnectedness, in that field, and that we have the capacity to tap into that humanity has had the capacity to tap into that over time. And possibly that's a capacity that is latent in us all, and that is just under the surface of all of us. And maybe now is the time where we have to brush some things off and get back to being able to work with that capacity. And as part of that, it's a slight simplification, but that becomes an agenda of growing our organs of perception, or realizing new organs of perception. The Prince in his book talks about the shift of perception required in this harmony work. And this feels like it's part of the capacity building that can do this. We tend to make sense from our heads, and from our heads we come to judgments, and we start losing our sense of the interconnectivity of things. Actually, we also have a belly knowing and a heart knowing. And we're probably aware that actually our belly, our bodies know things far quicker than our mind. And our heart knows them that much quicker too. And our head is often the last place to catch up with the reality and the truth of what's going on. So this methodology moves us from head concepts of judgment, of making categorizations of good and bad and proceeding on that basis. This is a methodology that is endlessly and profoundly inclusive. That doesn't mean that we stop discerning, but it does mean that we learn to judge less and to open to more.
I think there's something really important to say here too,
Please.
which is that what we're talking about here is what's been discussed in the conference for the past couple of days and in the Prince's book about the harmony principles and the place of interconnectedness. But what we observe, and these are natural orders that are observed, they're not man-made, what we're talking about. They're observed orders that underpin the flow or the movement and therefore the success and the agency of any system. And there is the Constellation Methodology. It holds at its heart the harmony principles, but it reveals a couple of really interesting extra points. And that is that all systems, body, family, organizational, Mother Earth, Gaia, all systems hold memory. Systems know their own completeness. And what we find in this work is, generally speaking, we all believe that the things that mess us up the most are those that are there. I mean, in terms of family systems, it's the people around us who are the most troublesome and difficult. But what this methodology shows is that it's actually the people that are missing that have the greatest impact on the flow and movement of our lives. Because the system knows its own completeness, and it's always moving towards balance. In fact, you could say that life was like a continual rhythm of imbalances that was always in process to take us to balance. And the movement behind every system it's been referred to here as love, but it's also about health. But the most fundamental thing that we see in this methodology is that what we're here to support is movement, and movement will take us wherever we need to go. So the kind of people, organizations, situations that we work with are those in which there's something stuck. So I've been doing work, I work in Lebanon with an amazing organization called Healing the Wounds of History, and I go over there and work 40 miles from the Syrian border with Syrian refugees, and we're looking at ways of trying to support the stability in Lebanon when so close to the country borders there's, war and turmoil, which touches very deeply the souls of all the Lebanese who remember their loyalties to their ancestors, their fathers, their grandfathers, their uncles, who took up arms and fought. And the question that we're holding is, how do we support them to move forward in life without unconsciously replicating patterns of loyalty that are held within the system, ways of knowing that replicate when they're not fully seen and received.
Thank you. So what we'd like to do is to try and move to a little experience that begins to sort of help us with this. And I'm hoping that one of you can volunteer. And what we're looking for is, if you go back to the dialogue you've just had and you thought about your heart's desire and where you are seeking to move and how, you probably encountered in your mind somewhere or somewhere in your body even an obstacle, a sense of, yeah, but, or this is in the way. Something that is a form of discord in your life, maybe at the moment, or in your work, or a relationship that keeps being bothersome and somehow foils your attempt to move forward in the way you'd like. Is there anybody who could just offer something of that? Just say, well, yeah, I've got this person or this thing that just gets in the way, some aspect that just gets in the way, and we'll just set it up and look at it very simply. And we won't go into it in a way that leaves you personally exposed. This is not the right place to do that, okay? So we're not going to work through the issue. But what we just want to do is to give you a sense of how the knowing field can show itself through this methodology. So is there? Lovely. Would you like to say a little?
Yes, certainly.
I'm going to leave you to interact with Gaye.
Yes. Okay.
Hi Gaye, thanks for that lovely environment. The obstacle I think that's preventing me from being as productive in savings from ourselves is an emotional one.
So how does the personal and your attendance here interact? Why do you see them as connected?
Yes, well I was back to this conversation with Rupert, who's over there, a friend of mine, kind of colleague, that we're both working on building agri-villages or eco-communities that are food positive, energy positive, water positive, biocapacity positive, etc., and kind of really address all of the concerns that have been raised at this conference. So it's wonderful work to do. I've experienced in building eco-communities before, and the stone I carry in my soul, and it's been heavy on relationships I've had in the past, is that I feel that my presence on earth is here to show examples of how we can live as a society in the future. And if I'm looking at my life backwards from my deathbed, I feel I will regret if I didn't do that. But I'm a very romantic, very loving person, but I, strangely, in the relationship I'm in, because I'm able to give a sort of level of commitment or move on, and I think that drains the sort of energy from me that I could be diverting to why I'm here.
Well, firstly, I'd like to really acknowledge your bravery. So you've gone right into the heart of the issue, which is exactly where we need to go with this work. So you've lined me up beautifully, but you've also been amazingly courageous, so I just want to register that. And also say, as Nick said, that we just don't have time. I could very happily work with you, but we don't have time to bring something to resolution. We can just explore. Is that okay? Just see where we go. Okay, so what I'm going to do is we're going to set up the situation. And there is, we can talk a lot about constellation work, and it all sounds quite interesting if you're interested in that kind of thing, or maybe it's boring. But the truly weird bit, and it is truly weird, is the process with which we work. And the reason why it's weird is it's sort of miraculous, because this is the moment at which we step in a very somatic, body-based way to the experience of being in relationship with the harmony principles directly. And as you step in, or not all of you, but some of you, I don't know which yet, so don't worry, or maybe worry, actually. But I'm going to borrow you for this process. And what happens when you're borrowed is you simply come and take your place, wherever you're set up. And then I'm going to ask you how you feel, and I'm going to start to tap into what is discordant in the system. For you, tell me your name. Ashley. For Ashley. And I just give you a sense of what this is all about, and this is such a tiny little fillet of what the potential of the work is, but we'll give you a go. So, first person I'd like you to select is someone for your soul's purpose, someone for the work that you know you're here to do.
Somebody in my life or somebody in the audience?
Just choose anybody in this room.
This gentleman there with the blue top, yes.
Okay, let's bring him in. So you're Ashley's soul's purpose, you're his work. Choose somebody for the partner who has a place, the one you're with now, but you feel has something in relation to this issue.
She's the lady on the end there.
Now choose somebody to represent yourself. Does he know you well?
He does.
So just forget everything you know about him. The things he doesn't know. That's good.
So my feet feel quite heavy and almost like it would be an effort to move.
Where's your attention drawn?
You mean in my body or you mean
In this space around.
this lady?
Can you see this one? I mean, that sounds like a funny question.
Yeah.
So obviously
yeah.
he's there.
Yeah, I can see him.
What's it like to have a look here?
Like that, you felt like he was moving backwards. Huh?
So what's going on for you?
I felt like I was moving backwards.
So let's move you. Is that better or worse?
Better. It's like tingle back in my head.
Okay. And you? What's happening for you?
Currently, I think I feel quite not within this space. I think I'm quite conscious of everyone else in the room. I feel like, oh, it's not on the rest of my body. I'm not sure what that's about.
Hold the microphone closer to your mouth, would you? Thank you.
Okay, did you hear that?
Yes.
Okay. And yeah, quite uncertain right at the moment.
So this is a bit of an unusual thing to do. So I'm now going to ask Gaye to make transparent to you what Gaye's now with. Okay, she's heard from each of the representatives. But what is it that Gaye is now doing with this information?
So what I'm doing is I'm leaning into my understanding of how systems and field energy works. And I'm looking for what's missing here, that's needed as a resource for Ashley to be able to step more fully into engagement with his soul's purpose. And I'm also reading what the priority of your need right now, what has precedence in the sense of needing your attention. And as you described, it seems that your representative, your partner, is the first priority that needs resolution. And there's connection here, but there's something that's not working. You're better off looking at a distance than you are in a closer relational field. And my sense is, if I was going to do this piece of work for you, which I'm not, but would be the next question would be to ask you about your father, probably, but certainly your parents and grandparents. And there's something here in the way that his body is leaning back out of the field that tells me that you're not you don't feel you have the strength or the blessing, as we'd call it, in some way, or there's some loyalty or connection with your father that's not enabling you to stand fully in your own shoes in that sense of being able to move and engage in your life's purpose.
Okay.
So you're getting energy. So what I would do next, can I take you?
Gaye, I'm going to just pause.
Okay.
So what happened then was, having described that, the representative reported a surge of energy up his back and through. So there was some aliveness in your response to Gaye's description of how she was reading the field, right? So just to take us back to where we started, what has happened here is that three naive representatives who broadly don't know anything about Ashley's life have come and stepped into a field that we're saying holds information about Ashley and his past and his future. And through what these naive representatives can report through their bodily knowing has direct relevance, can be read as deeply significant information in terms of what is going on in Ashley's system. Not just in the present, but in the past and for the future. And in a sense, that's a key part of this methodology that is somewhat unbelievable. And I'd like to just pause there and just to see if there's any response to that proposition in the audience. Is that something that you could broadly go along with for now? Or are you sitting there thinking, hold on, no way. No way am I going to start understanding my systemic context through an exercise like this, where naive representatives come and stand in for me and my issues, or says something about my system. Would anybody like to say anything about that?
I hope this is useful, but there was a program years ago about out-of-body experiences I watched, and it was about a person having an operation, and they had an out-of-body experience, and what the program did was linked it to string theory, and how string theory works in multiple dimensions, and suggesting that our consciousness actually works outside our body, which I thought was quite fascinating given the kind of evidence of this person who'd gone out of their body, seen the hospital from the roof, seen all the things around, and described them after the operation. So that's kind of a hook for me to think that this, obviously string theory is quite kind of edge of theoretical physics, but links it to a kind of quasi-physical description of what might be happening if there's a field, and I'm assuming this is a kind of force field sense, but maybe a more metaphorical meaning. That helps me to kind of think, well, I can clue into this in some way. It doesn't feel too weird.
Thank you. So that's exactly the sort of contribution that I think is helpful. So there's something that is speaking to your knowing and your experience that says, yeah, maybe. Anybody else?
Yeah.
Sorry. Gaye, do you want to ask these three to sit down, do you think? Or is there...
I'm going to do one last intervention, but let's have another comment first.
Yes, it's fascinating. I have to reconcile with you on this. But what happened was, when you asked gentlemen to sort of choose people, I went so cold, and I just wanted to put that in as to if that is significant, that we are all connected, and I had a physical reaction before you even started. I just thought, I'd tell you now.
It's very relevant.
Respond to that, Gaye.
You almost sat me. I mean, when we're working in this way collectively, everybody is working. So you're part of what we call the holding circle, and you would almost certainly be representing something in Ashley's system. So you have a part to play. So you're beginning to tune in to, I mean, it is an extraordinary human capacity that we all have, that anybody, literally anybody, without any prior experience, can, through the process of intention, represent something that reveals hidden, it's like hidden knowledge, it's hidden information. And
so what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask Gaye just to do this closing move for Ashley, and so the representatives can sit down, and then I'll just check in to the couple of other people who had their hands up, okay?
so something really interesting has happened between you two while we've not been paying attention to you, which is you've both moved. You're already in a dance or a dynamic together. And exactly. So you're all starting to read what I'm reading. But look at the mirroring postures. But because I began something, I'm just going to do a tiny piece. I'm going to come back to you. Can I take you? I'm going to take you as his father. I don't know anything about his life. I'm going to turn you around and just come and stand behind him. Now, one of the things that we know in this work is the difference between priority and precedence. And maybe that's a little complicated, we might leave that for another day, but the flow or the movement in a system, in a family system, always goes from above to below. So parents beget children who beget children. And when we're standing in that alignment, then the family system in this situation has more capacity for movement and change. We have more available energy to adjust things so that we're back into the flow of life. So I just want to know how you're doing with your father standing behind you. It might be a bit complicated, but how are you doing? You want to move that way? And what's happening for you?
Well, it's very poignant because my father's my best friend. My mother has dementia, and I've been for the last month on projects of saving Dad because I see him about to sort of have a nervous breakdown under the pressure of having my mum having dementia. And there are parallels in the relationship that my father's not been in love with my mum for many decades, but he's stuck with it.
So what's happening in your life now is mirroring what happened in your father's situation.
Not quite the same.
But there are echoes or patterns
yes,
which are replicated. How are you doing as his dad?
Well, I felt very, I had a huge amount of energy when I was stood right behind Rupert, and felt really kind of slightly angry. As soon as Rupert moved out of the way, all of that energy dissipated, and then actually I could see, I forget your name, Phil, and I felt much more at ease. And then I noticed Phil started walking a little this way, and I felt very good about that.
And you?
When you moved, I felt drawn to move in a bit and turn, and I was completely focused on you, knowing that these guys were here, both of them. That there was a sort of, somehow, I don't know, an assurance or something that it was okay to turn to you. I don't know who I am, but anyway, it doesn't matter.
But I think...
So I'm going to ask Gaye to just draw this to a close so we can keep moving and help the audience understand what you're doing as you do that.
So we are going to stop here because we could start to unravel everything that's going on here. But I mean, there is, as you've already described, there is what we call a systemic repetition going on here between you and your dad. And it seems in some way that your soul's purpose, were you to live it fully, would also be honouring a purpose that your father felt he hadn't lived. Does that make sense to you? So this connection is really important. And the next step would be for me to find a way for you and your father to get back into better father-son relationship so that you could align yourself more fully with what you want to do, you know, what you're here to do. And we would have to bring in someone for your mum to untangle the confusion that's going on between you and your partner and your father and your mother. So there's a crossover there, which is what we would call a kind of systemic hidden loyalty. So I talked earlier about systems holding memory. And in this work, we don't work in chronological time. We work in vertical time. So John Eliot Gardner yesterday twice talked about this in music, that there are these two dimensions. And we see it in this work too, that we tend to think of life as being organized in this chronological, historical way. But also there's this other dimension of time that the Greeks called kairos, which is vertical time, in which everything in time and space has a place. So within this, what systems do is they replicate whatever's unfinished, whether it's Gaia, whether it's in our body, whether it's in our family, or whether it's in an organisation. So this particular structure is quite, something we see a lot. It's a kind of entanglement with what went before, which is hinged upon a piece that's missing. Thank you all very much.
So you've seen some of this just now, and what Gaye was beginning to talk about there is some of the, what we call the orders that one needs to take care of working systemically, such that systems can find a harmony and a greater balance and a greater fulfillment. So dimensions of belonging and inclusion, dimensions of time, people being in their right place, and the nature of exchange, the give and take that exists between people in the system has to be in a good order. And then there's a curious piece which is about having done the work. What often happens is that having done a piece of work with one micro part of the system, strange things happen in the following weeks, months, years in the wider system. It's as if the soul that has been touched through the particular experience of this work manages to impact a much wider system than seems possible.
So we don't have to be present to the work to be affected by it. And there are a myriad of stories of pieces of work done between family members, particularly who are estranged, who then, lost contact completely, and within a week, the one that wasn't even at the workshop or whatever gets in contact. There's strange points of synchronicity which happen all the time. So it's as if as systems we work in a similar way to a baby's mobile. If you touch one element, all the rest either come back into balance or go out of balance, but that everything is interconnected, as we were talking about. So we can live through this work, a visceral, body-based experience of being absolutely one with this interconnected matrix of life.
We could stay with what you've experienced so far, and we could just have one or two more questions and answers and so on. Or, what we'd quite like to do is to open this up further and to look at how this process can work for organisations and in wider systems.
Or even for the Earth.
And even for the Earth itself, that bigger system. I'm seeing a lot of nodding in the audience, as if that's where, as a group, you're encouraging us to go. Does anybody have a strong opposition to that? Part of this work is about including where there is resistance, and I want to honour that. So you'd like to speak?
I wouldn't describe it as a strong opposition, but I noticed that when I read that first line on the slide, and you put it up there, following what just happened, I began to feel tearful. And I'm thinking about why that is, and I realised that there's something that I want, and I don't know how to get it. So I kind of want harmony, but in my life, I don't know how to get it. Now, at the same time, I like the idea of discord. Discord in music is interesting. If there was harmony all the time, it would be boring. So discord does have value, and I'm kind of attached to that. So I kind of want harmony, but I'm afraid that if I embrace it completely, then part of me will be not included. It won't be able to be outside. I don't think you can have a harmonious system that includes absolutely everything.
It's a really good question, because one of the edges of this work in relation to the harmony principles is that, as we've already said, a system knows its own completeness, and it's organised around belonging and around inclusion. It's not, and what I'm talking about, they're not ideas that we've imposed upon this structure. This is what we've observed, the natural laws that emerge when you work in this way with the harmony principles. So the stretch for us as human beings is for us really to find a place where we're really aligned with a quality of agency or action that can bring about fundamental change in the world. We have to, the first step is we have to make a space for the perpetrators. We have to make a space for those that we wish would just disappear, for those that we regard as wrong or bad. So within that, within every system is discord, as you say. So what you bring, even to this system, we've created, already together, a system in this room, and your contribution is really valuable in that it holds, it brings our attention to the fullness of what's held here. So discord has a place in harmony, and our task is to open in such a way, and this is the transitional point, this is the sacred, the spiritual point that's been discussed in different ways in different sessions. Our task, if we really want to be effective, is to find a way of holding it all. Because as soon as we exclude, we judge, we stand above something we don't like, agrochemicals or whatever else it is, then in a sense we bind ourselves to it more strongly. So it's a huge, the work that we're talking about here, it requires an inner movement that's a big stretch. It's not fluffy, it's not light, and it's not easy. And it's not about making everything better. What it's about is holding a place that enables everything to simply be and manifest in accordance with that drive towards healing and health. And nature is doing this for us all the time.
I'm going to push us on, if that's okay, because I think there's a nice segue from what Gaye's just said, that intervention. I've been touched by conversations I've had at this conference. It feels like there's a real theme of people here really realizing that there's some task which is about they're seeing that the answers they are perceiving or they feel they're with at the moment cannot be alighted upon by their own efforts alone, and that they are deeply dependent on their colleagues in this space. That there are all sorts of people, whether it was the chief executive of the RSPB I was talking to, or heads of foundations, there's this sense of we're actually thinking more and more in terms of systems, of an open tent policy, a big tent policy. How do we invite in all sorts and then make sense of where our different contributions sit, precisely, and how do they interrelate, and how do we find our right position in relation to each other? And it feels to me that that's very much in this field of right relationship and the mystery of how do we do that. We can network, we can have dinner with each other, and yet maybe there's some other form of intelligence that we're needing to draw on to find that ideal movement that really supports this work. And here quickly is some principles that may help guide, and we're hoping to have another quick kind of experience in a moment. So I'd be delighted if somebody here has got something that's come out of their conference experience, maybe, as the head of an organisation or as somebody who's working with policy, and you're thinking, there's something in my system that I'd like to have a look at, or that needs some sort of illumination and resolution. What might that be? Just 1 second. So here are some some provocations. What has been forgotten and needs to be remembered is a big one. I work with the Director of Children's Services in a local authority, and she was struggling to get her team to settle. They just, people were off sick all the time, they were up against terrible sort of demands. And what had transpired is there'd been a serious case review where a child had died and one of the caseworkers had been expelled from the system. And what the work required was a remembering of the child that had died and the caseworker. And it was through working through that process and giving them a place in the system rather than trying to forget and exclude. And that was the key to the whole system finding a new form. Are there people or elements in the wrong place? I've worked in corporations often where somebody, for historical reasons, is given a sort of token role because they've been there for 25 years and it's too hard to ask them to move on. And what happens, that person often sort of becomes a bit narcissistically inflated and starts sort of floating around, and you can tell they don't really know what they're there to do. And they become incredibly destructive in the organisation, even though the impulse was to be kind to them and to keep them included. So that can be very destructive to a system if people are in the wrong place. You can look in this work at the extent to which your system is aligned with a true sense of purpose, with its fate. Many organisations waste vast amounts of energy actually trying to do things that they're not actually here to do. It was never in the founding intention or in the possibility of the system. How can systems clarify that sense of purpose? This work, I think, can help. And back to the principle of exchange. When people are paid too much for jobs that actually don't deserve that level of pay, or when people are paid too little, maybe it's a different form of giving and receiving. But that upsets systems very much, and a system will look to show that. It'll show the dysfunction of it somehow. Is there anything you'd like to add, or should we go straight to an experience?
We should go straight to experience. Well, there's some things in my mind that I want to share with you, which is that Syngenta commissioned a £3 million 3-year research or leadership program based on this methodology. And, in relation to how it's perceived within the sort of organisational field, there are a few gems that we, on this side of the fence, I'm now lining myself underneath the good and bad label, but we need to attend to because others are picking up on the, not just the validity, but the power of the information that's revealed. And we need to be with them rather than, it's also been used, Tony Blair's government used this methodology, various other, there are lots of people out there, but it tends to be the multinational corporations that have the money that are initiating research projects that are leaning in to this way of knowing, this way of diagnosing issues within organisations and businesses and movements. So, yeah.
I'm adjusting time as we go, so we're going to sum up in 5 minutes now and have 10 minutes for a quick experience. So is there a leader here?
In my own organisation, I find constantly this tension between reassuring the trustees that I'm servicing the organisation and giving it what it needs, while helping the organisation play a more authentic and fulfilling contribution to the wider system of which we're part, is again a dilemma where I could do any help you want to give.
Okay, well we're not going to have time to do a full piece of work, but what we could do is we could set something up which hopefully might reveal something, a little piece that's of interest to you. Should we do that?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, so we need to choose somebody to represent you.
From the...
Yep,
okay,
anyone. Somebody to represent. In fact, let's have how many on your board of trustees?
Okay, so we'll do my case, not
Yep.
Richard's case. I've got 5 trustees.
Okay, so let's have 2 or 3 people to represent them.
Okay. So, are you up for it? Okay, so I've got, so who are you going to be? You and me?
Yeah.
Okay, so I need a chair, my chair.
No, we'll just have 3 because we haven't got a lot of time. So
Yeah.
this is the trustees.
Yeah,
You're right doing it again, okay?
thank you.
And we want,
Stakeholders from the outside world.
yeah, 2 stakeholders from the outside world.
Yeah, Rosemary, yeah.
And we want the overarching purpose.
The overarching purpose is held differently by the different groups.
Okay.
So we're looking for a healthy food system in Cornwall.
Okay, so choose somebody to represent that. Move them back a little.
Okay, Graham, can you step up?
Okay, you can sit down. So just find your place in the circle. You might be anywhere, but just rely on your tummy somehow letting you know where your right place is. And as he finds his right place, just notice, all of you, what happens in your body. What happened to you?
I started to feel quite a lot of heat and some
Anxiety. Heat and anxiety. You? What happened for you?
a strong feeling just running down the middle of me.
So between the 2 sides of your body, just straight down the middle. And
reflected.
right. And you?
And I do feel majority. I feel definitely feel energized.
Okay, well we've immediately hit on what you've already told us, which is that your trustees are aligned to different purposes. So some feel good with this, some feel split down the middle, and some feel. How do you feel?
I'm surprised to feel my arms started feeling quite light. I felt a kind of wobble forward in my legs, and then I had just a second ago, a kind of wave going up in the front of my body, up through my body.
Well, he's in the wrong place, for starters. And you, as Matthew?
Okay, I'm going to interrupt. What do you mean for people here? When you say he's in the wrong place, what are you actually saying?
Well, as the purpose, as the overarching aim of the organisation, we would expect him to have a feeling that was impersonal. And what he's feeling straight away are very personal sensations in his body. And he's also not feeling a sense of strength, which, I've got 2 microphones, which is not good. I mean, this is, if you like, the guiding principle of all that you're doing. The purpose of everything is organised around this. And he's not strong. He's falling back, his arms are light, he's not feeling great. So we need desperately to reorder your system in a way that gives him strength and clarity, and then find out what supports that, and what supports the others in the organisation, all of you, the whole system, in order for everybody to be in the best place they possibly can be in relation to this. So what's happening for the stakeholders?
I feel very firmly grounded. My feet are very firmly placed on the floor.
Great, thank you. And you?
Initially, I noticed that I lined up a little bit like I'm about to play a football match, so I was actually in opposition to the trustees, and then I felt a fragile sense of protection from the arrival of the purpose, just in terms of some electricity in my hands, but it fell away.
Right. Right. Is Matthew?
Tearfully sick.
Tearfully sick. How's that for you to hear?
I can see why you didn't want to take a chance of me just walking in and picking it up, but incredibly insightful, and I'm really grateful to everybody for indulging this.
Just have a look here at your representative.
Wow. Christopher must be being extremely sensitive. His reaction when I selected him was, oh shit. Whether he's already ready or whether he's in the exercise.
He's in the exercise, but I mean, it says to me that you need a bit of help in your organisation, that this is overwhelming.
That is how I feel.
Exactly. So, let's do something. We have to do a little thing because we haven't got time. I'm hoping you're all getting the idea about this. I mean, normally a piece of work takes about an hour, and we keep working until there's balance restored to the system. We can't do much right now. We'll do a tiny bit just to get it back into better shape. Yeah.
As soon as you said what you said, I felt a surge of energy up my right leg. And I also, when you started crying, I started responding. And the fact you moved me around, I feel more grounded suddenly, and less wobbly in my legs.
And he's getting stronger just by having this alignment with you. So the only thing that really brings you strength in your purpose, in your job, is to be really closely aligned with this purpose.
I got very cold when Christopher said what he said, and I feel already warmer, but those two things together very quite distinctively.
Right. And how are you feeling in terms of the line down the middle?
Less.
Less.
So as soon as there was an emotional response, I felt the anxiety lifted, and I feel much more present and much more interested.
Okay. Can I take somebody? Can I take you? Yes, what would you like to say?
Well, what I'd like to say is, weirdly, as everything was set up in the original position, the top of my head was tingling like crazy.
Okay, let's get you in. I want you to come and stand behind him as Cornwall, and what's needed for the greater good. What's happening to you? And I brought that in.
So intellectually, I'm observing the distance that's emerged between my board of trustees and me and my purpose and that reflects, I suppose, an emotional sense I have. Personally, like my head, my God, it's just playing in a good way. I want to give Christopher a hug, but I don't want to interrupt the
It's all right, he'll be fine when he sits down. When he sits down, it'll all go. It just comes and goes. You're happier facing this direction.
So just to wrap up, this is some of what we've covered today, but not all of it. This way of thinking and working, I'd like to just speak to that fourth piece. Enables us to weep and yet stay with our own strength. There's a paradox there. There's strength in weeping, because that allows you to not get caught in the loyalty to previous systems or systems in your history or in the system that is trying to reproduce itself, that is trying to harness you in a way that is not in your interest or not in the system's interest. So there's a lot of people who help, who seek to help, but actually they get entrained in the system and they lose their strength as a result. And this supports us to bow to the incomplete views of others and to work, I think, humbly, but ever more powerfully as a result. Gaye, 2 sentences and then we finish.
Something I really wanted to say, I'll try and do it in 2 sentences, and that is that one of the things that fascinated me in the early days of working in the organic movement was how we were all working, throwing vast amounts of energy in the pursuit of a passionate commitment to try and make things better in the world. And yet what resulted in us pursuing a sustainable goal was really unsustainable lives. And it was all right then, because, well, I was, and most of us were young, so we had energy to burn, and we burnt it. We really burnt it. And it was great. But it wasn't sustainable. And so one of the questions that I brought for myself, a personal question that I brought to this methodology when I first learned about it, was what would really support us as environmentalists to make a difference? You know, where do we need to be systemically? Where's the right place? The founder of this work describes health as right place. It's when we stand without pulls and distortions into other systems or generations behind us or whatever. So what's the right place for us as environmentalists if we really want to make an impact? And it's a simple answer, that the right place is to move from that perception that what we're here to do is save the planet to a place where we take our place as the recipient of the beauty, the wonder, the everythingness of Mother Nature. And what that requires us to do, actually, it's one step from a kind of humility. And we talked in one of the sessions yesterday about gratitude and humility, but they're both feelings inside which open the heart. You know, when we feel humility in the way that it touches us, we're actually in the right place, and our task is to receive from Mother Nature, not to give. And that is so closely linked with humility too. So, as environmentalists, we've got to stop trying to save our parents, metaphorically, and start receiving from them. But in this case, it's Mother Earth. And it's a big spiritual task, and I think this conference has begun a conversation about that. How do we find the right place inside in order to have true agency, to be aligned with systemic movement, with action? And it's not about being bigger than nature. So that's what I wanted to say to you all. And that's it. We're done.